Michigan police officer is on administrative leave right now while city officials investigate why he had a Ku Klux Klan application framed in his home, and also why the whole place was decorated with Confederate flags. I'm always fascinated by why there are Confederate flags in places like Oklahoma, Michigan. I don't know. It's not part of your history, but okay. Here's more info. Muskegon City Manager Frank Peterson was alerted to Officer Charles Anderson's disturbing memorabilia after an African-American man toured the white officer's home, which is for sale, according to the statewide news site MLive. Now, Rob Mathis wrote on Facebook that the 5-bedroom home was littered with Confederate memorabilia. The KKK application was hanging in one of the bedrooms, and it lacks a name and a signature. And we also have found out about this same officer. He actually 10 years ago shot and killed a black man although he was cleared of any wrongdoing. Here's his info here. In 2009, the 48-year-old officer killed a 23-year-old man, Julius Johnson, after the man fled on foot after a traffic stop and then allegedly beat the officer in the head. Anderson had been called in as backup, apparently relating to the smell of marijuana.
Oh, so it was serious. Of course. Okay.
He said he shot Johnson because he feared for his life, and the local prosecutor said Anderson was justified in using deadly force.
Of course. When someone is running away from you on foot, that is when your life is really in danger, because they might get away after having hit another officer, which would hurt your feelings. And so probably best time to execute them. It doesn't matter. You're going to be cleared on all charges pretty much every single time in America. So anyway, so that's that case. That was from about a decade ago. In terms of the Klan memorabilia, etc. Two things I'd like to note: if you're rooting for the Confederacy, you're rooting for traitors. Caused more American deaths in battle than any other war. The traitors that you celebrate, that's just a fact. They committed treason and they fought America. They killed Americans. And if you're celebrating the KKK, apparently you love terrorists. The biggest terrorist America has ever seen was the KKK. If you don't agree to that, you're wrong and probably a weirdo racist. So what? Oh, lynchings? No, not terrorism. Burning across on people's lawns to terrorize them, not terrorism. Bombing churches and killing little children, not terrorism. Obviously, the biggest terrorist for centuries in America. So it's if you're a cop, celebrating terrorists is a curious thing to do. And finally, look, if there's a professor that has Mein Kampf in their library, likely they're doing it for research and reading it, and people should read it so they know the terrors and can know about the warnings. If there's an African-American professor who has a KKK certificate on his wall, he likely is doing that for historical reasons, research reasons, etc. Could it be that it's a non-African American professor or someone else, etc., that has that kind of interest, but on an intellectual level, so that they and you would have to back that up with some context for that person, no matter what their race is, being great on civil rights issues, and then having that as a warning in their house, hey, never forget, etc. If you have someone who has not been great on those issues and their house is littered with Confederate and KKK material, well, that's a different story. And if you can't see that that's a problem, that that's a cop going around with a gun and a badge, again, there's something wrong with you.
And in a society that you would hope stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all, they would maybe look into reopening that case, considering that now we see something that is potentially leading to, I don't know, some sort of bias in a situation like that, with someone unarmed running away and being shot and killed. But this is a society where 90% of police officers, when shooting unarmed folk, are let off and never held accountable. So I cover this subject religiously, and issues like this should surprise me, but they don't. Accountability is one of the biggest flaws in basically in law enforcement in the United States, because then it allows people to slip through the cracks. And I know everyone likes to say it's only a few bad apples, but if you never hold bad apples accountable, then they continue to, I don't know, rot the whole department. And you never seem to see any issues like this coming out when people are held accountable. But we see officers like Betty Shelby, who shot and killed Terrence Crutcher, giving classes on how to overcome that really tough situation in her life. We see officers like Timothy Loman, who shot and killed Tamir Rice, being rehired. We see officers like Pantaleo not being held accountable until what? 5 years, and now he's only been suspended now. So all of a sudden, this cop who has these prejudiced, I don't know, memorabilia in his house.
Outright racist.
And now all of a sudden it's like, well, he did shoot and kill a black man back in 2009, but let's focus on this right now. Well, why was this never brought up at the time? Because you're trying to tell me no one else knew that this man had some sort of bias or prejudice in his system? It's because we continue to allow police officers to be rehired or put in different positions without being held accountable. And what happens is they slip through the cracks and they continue to rot this system that I want to believe in. But until you hold officers accountable, issues like this will continue to come up.
And what are we going to find in this investigation? What is the answer when you say, why do you have all of these Confederate flags? Well, because I believe in states' rights. The one right they were fighting for was the bad one. Yeah. That was it.
Yeah.
It was, and it's just like, so what is his answer going to be?
Yeah, it wasn't like, hey, we really wanted the right to be able to produce hemp in our states. No, it was about slavery.
Slaves, that was it.
Anyway, I don't want to get into that obvious conversation. Last thing, I agree with Francis on reopening the case because, guys, if we had found a certificate from any other terrorist organization in a cop's house, we'd definitely look into all of his cases. Imagine you go into a Muslim cop's house and you find a certificate from ISIS. You think you might want to reopen investigations, especially one where he murdered a Christian, right?
Well, you wouldn't have to. He'd already be held accountable, such as Officer Noor in Minnesota.
Yeah,
the officer that was held accountable for that.
So exactly. So and that's the most extreme case, and we've never even had that of a certificate of ISIS or anything like that from a cop. But the KKK is just as much of a terrorist group. Well, hey, you made it this far. You must really like the Young Turks. Thank you. We really appreciate you. Now, another easy way to keep supporting us also helps keep your internet activities and data private, all with a push of the NordVPN app. Head to nordvpn.com/TYT right now for 75% off of your next 3 years.